Hey, I'm Chris Harrison with Church 212, the executive pastor there. As you know, my dad and I have been teaching a series on Sunday about the gifts of the Spirit and about discovering the power and releasing the power that's within you. And really, we're going to continue that on our online series to teach you more specifics about the gifts of the Spirit and how they relate to you. Some definitions, what they are, how they operate, because I want you to help discover if maybe some of those resonate on the inside of you. You know, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 says, the gifts of the Spirit are given to every person, that there is a manifestation that's given to every person to profit with all. So in other words, there is spiritual power that's been given to every Christian. If you're born again, there's spiritual power on the inside of you. There's a special gift. That word gift is a word it's a Greek word, charisma, and it means an endowment of power. For God just to put on you and endow upon you spiritual power. And you may not even know the kind of spiritual power that's available to you. You may not realize what's on the inside of you, and that's what we want to help you with. And so in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7, it says, to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the effecting of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the distinguishing of spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, and to another interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually as He wills. And so he says it's up to God. God decides who gets what gifts. Not one gift's better than another gift. They're just different. And they operate in different ways. And the Bible teaches here that the Spirit of God decides who gets what gifts. But in 1 Corinthians 14, the Bible says that we are to desire spiritual gifts. He said desire spiritual gifts, and especially that you may prophesy. So what are these gifts? How do they operate? Well, this is just one of several places the Bible teaches about gifts. But really they break down into three categories. There's 9 gifts here in 1 Corinthians 12. You can break them down into 3 categories. We call it the revelation gifts. These are the gifts that reveal something. The power gifts. And the power gifts are the gifts that do something. And of course then the utterance gifts or the inspirational gifts. And they're the gifts that say something. And so these 3 different categories are different types of gifts in each one. So let's talk about the revelation gifts for just a minute. In the revelation gifts, basically the 3 are this: the word of wisdom, the word of knowledge, and the discerning of spirits. The word of wisdom, word of knowledge, discerning of spirits. We call these the revelation gifts. Of course, the power gifts is the gifts of healing, the gift of faith, and the working of miracles. Those are the power gifts. They do something. And the utterance gifts, or the inspirational gifts, some people call them, are tongues and interpretation of tongues and prophecy. And these are gifts that say something. And of course, we need all the gifts. But we're going to talk specifically this week about the revelation gifts and help you understand the revelation gifts, whether you need to recognize them in your own life or maybe you need to recognize someone you know that really flows in this. The word of wisdom has to do with having a word or a part, just a fragment of the total mind of God about the future. In the Bible, wisdom always deals with the future. You know, the Bible says if the princes of this world would have had the wisdom, if they would have had the wisdom, they would have not crucified the Lord of glory. See, they didn't have the wisdom. It spoke of the future. All in Proverbs, the future and wisdom are tied in together. So it has to do with knowing things about the future that you would not have known if the Spirit of God would not have told you. So ahead of time, the Spirit of God supernaturally reveals something about the future. This is all through the Bible, and we'll explore it specifically. The word of knowledge is when God gives you just a word, just a fragment, just a part of the mind of God about things that are in the present or things that are in the past. I'll give you a good example of this. When I was pastoring in a little town in Sylacauga, Alabama, I saw a little 15-year-old boy at the front porch of the church. And this young man was about 15 years of age, and he seemed like he was troubled. And I invited him to come into church, and of course he began to tell me church wasn't for him. He's not all into church. He doesn't believe in church and all this kind of thing. And suddenly the Lord revealed to me supernaturally. And I said, you know what, young man? God called you to preach when you were 15 years of age, and you've been running from Him. At this time, actually, he was 18 years of age. I said, God called you to preach when you were 15, and you've been running ever since. Man, when I said that, he looked shocked. He said, how did you know that? And I said, the Lord told me that. And man, instantly, tears coming down his face. He couldn't believe that somebody called him out. He couldn't believe that God found him right there. He wasn't even expecting it that day. And got his life right with God and began to follow a call to preach the gospel. And that was because of a word of knowledge. God gave me a word. He gave me a part of His knowledge about something in the past. And I was able to reveal it to somebody supernaturally. Not because of me, not because of my holiness, nothing like that, but because it was a gift, an endowment. The other one is the discerning of spirits. And this really has to do with, really you could say, with three worlds. The discerning of the demonic, the angelic, and of the human spirit. That by the Spirit of God, God supernaturally shows you the motive of something, or shows you what's behind something. You can see it. You know, even one time Jesus was dealing with someone who couldn't speak and couldn't hear. And instead of praying a prayer of healing for them, here's what He said: you deaf and dumb spirit, come out of him. And He cast the devil out. So supernaturally, it was revealed that there was a demonic spirit that was behind the sickness. And so the discerning of spirits is necessary. There's a place for the discerning of spirits. People sometimes get into weird stuff and all that, but it's not supposed to be weird. It's supposed to be normal. And all these different gifts, the Bible says, is given to each one to profit withal. So those are some of the revelation gifts, but we're going to get into specifically this week about the revelation gifts. We're going to teach you what the Bible says about each one of the revelation gifts, and then we're going to get in after that. These are little 5 to 8 minute Bible studies each day. Then we're going to get into the power gifts, and then the utterance gifts. And I hope that it's going to stir you up to desire earnestly spiritual gifts. All you got to do is go to church212.com/ or actually just click on the media tab at church212.com and then click on daily Bible studies. Also, you can go to YouTube, youtube.com/212thechurch, 212 the church. And you can get those Bible studies there. If you missed one, you can go back and get the other Bible studies on YouTube. All right, God bless you. We'll see you next time. I'm praying for you.